I've worked with some of our investors. We've had potential cannabis users come in, and there's definitely a lot of complexity there and challenge in most spaces, or most landlords that are already pretty profitable often are hesitant. Can you talk a little bit about, I think one of the things that's always interested me is there a large contingent of folks that lease? Because it seems that most people, it's owner user, or an owner sale to lease back, or that kind of situation.
Yeah, and it's a unique, I would say, audience or class of property owner and landlords that have navigated the system. If you do it well, if you have people on your team, either internally through your investment, or if you're a family office that's focused on building a small REIT, for example, if you understand the complexity, it can be very profitable. So supply and demand, because of the very difficult zoning and permitting in each locality and state by state, if you're in a highly dense populated area and there's limited property available because of the zoning, your property could yield two, three, sometimes more multiples of premium rent. Now you have to be careful because obviously you don't want to choke your tenant. Just because you can demand something doesn't mean that's sustainable. Um, but the reason it's still, I'd say, very early, and there are a lot of real estate owners, investors, and landlords kind of watching from the sideline, is until we have federal reform, there are real barriers to entry for a lot of property owners, a lot of fatal flaws. So the big ones tend to be insurance on the property. So understanding that the underwriting process and your insurance carrier probably probably now the industry is matured enough, probably now has an exclusion for cannabis. So anyone that has a cannabis tenant listening right now, go immediately check your insurance policy and see if the word cannabis is mentioned. If it's not, you might want to check with your agency. So insurance is the first big one. Commercial debt is the second. Almost all commercial debt lending facilities or lines or whatever structure you have, most real estate people are leveraging outside capital. Smart thing to do. Um, but have policies for no federally illegal activity. So that's a huge issue. There are now capital sources, banks, REITs that will finance these properties. You got to make sure that you have one that knows what your building is operating with its tenancy and that doesn't void anything or cause any defaults. So check with your attorneys. And then the third big one is servicing. So a huge barrier to entry for big commercial landlords, especially at the retail level. These are typically small footprint retail doors, 2 to 5,000 square feet. And if you've got a $200 million commercial center that's anchored by a grocery or a movie theater, that the risk that your property management and servicing company has to maybe disallow cannabis servicing, or it voids part of that agreement, or your anchor tenant has waiver rights around what other tenancies can be around. We had a really big project in an amazing center here in Scottsdale where an anchor tenant was, I would say, highly religiously affiliated and did not want cannabis in the site. All the zoning got done. Like an amazing deal would have brought foot traffic back to the site. The landlord wanted it, but this anchor tenant said no, and it killed the deal. So anyone listening, kind of these are the really important, obviously lots of people listening, Gordon, but anyone listening looking to get into cannabis, those are the three critical pieces. And then there's obviously the complexity related to the zoning, permitting, making sure you have development design that meets state and local cannabis regulations for that actual physical infrastructure like security, safe rooms, ingress, egress that is a little different in cannabis sometimes than standard retail. So yeah, I think what we like to say, Gordon, is make sure you have a real estate brain trust on your team. If you are a broker, if you are a real estate professional, if you're an investor, make sure there's someone on your team that has cannabis experience. We often engage with third-party clients as that kind of fractional outsource brain trust. But it's the really exciting thing about today in cannabis, kind of the start of 2023, one of my big predictions for this year in the industry is that it would be the first year that we will see a mass joining of standard real estate professionals that want to get into cannabis. It's the whatever you want to call it, the tipping point, the toothpaste out of the tube. We now have over 40 states in the country that have some form of regulated cannabis, whether that's medical only or adult use or restrictive CBD related cannabis programs like Texas has, for example. The vast majority of voters want this. Every poll that I've seen kind of over the past now 6 to 12 months has 70-80% numbers across bipartisan, across demographics. So I think that's the big thing. If you're interested in touching the space, find some expertise, read everything you can, and listen to these types of conversations where we're talking about the nitty gritty.
A change of pace from the get-rich-quick gurus. Subscribe to the Real Finds podcast for in-depth conversations with voices shaping the real estate world.